Hey, everybody. I'm Delisa. I am the dream doula for creative spiritual women.
And I'm ZenRen.
Oh my God, ZenRen. Okay, your actual name is Lauren.
Lauren Van Der Veen.
Lauren Van Der Veen, who, when we talked about doing this podcast, I'm like, what are we going to talk about? She is such a multi-talented person. It's like when you meet her, it's like winning the lotto. She's so cool. And today we're going to talk about one of the many facets of her beautiful life, which is her design work. So you're an architect, right?
I am an interior architect. Yes, I am. Yes.
Wait, as opposed to an exterior architect? Wait, what? What? I didn't even know there was interior, exterior. Tell me more.
It's funny that you call yourself a doula because I consider myself to be an architectural doula,
Oh,
which
yeah.
means I think of design from the inside out. I think of it like a womb, like architecture is this place that should be nurturing. And
Mm.
so I build space around programming, around rituals, around habits, around people. And then we start to think about what it looks like in the materiality. But the way that we move through space is kind of what makes me an interior architect versus just an architect that spends a lot of time on building envelopes.
Ooh, I love that so much. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a real estate broker for 35 years.
Nice.
Wow. So I remember one time I used to say, what kind of house do you want? What kind of neighborhood do you want? And then one of my friends asked it in a more specific way. I think more like what you look at. She's like, what do you want to be doing in your neighborhood? And what do you want to be doing in your kitchen? And what would you love to be doing in your backyard? And then she got an idea of what the people wanted as their lifestyle, and she found the house that fit that.
Bingo.
So it's
That's
not like
exactly
how many
it.
bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how many square foot. It's not that. It's so much more than that.
It can be. It can be. It can be so much more than that. But it's also like the type of person. Some people just want bells and whistles, and some people do want to create spaces that make their lifestyles really come true. You know what I mean? Like if you want to meditate, you need to have a meditating space. If you want to bathe, you have to have a bathtub. And so I really try to like extract what people really want in their designs, and then, of course, we create an entire spatial awareness around that.
Okay, I have a pet peeve about bathtubs. Can I share that with you?
Of course, you can. They're dirty.
No, bathtubs, like all the latest, most of the latest places I've gone to or even lived in apartments style, the bathtub is just jammed right up next to the wall behind it. And there's no space to rest your head while you're relaxing in the water. I'm like, what is with that? Who even thinks that a good idea? I know that you can buy the tub and fit it into the space, but does anybody else just want to rest their head on the edge of the bathtub like me? Am I the only one?
I want to rest my head. I want a place for my book, candles, deep conditioner, bath salts. Absolutely. But that's the difference between working with a developer and working with an architect. Because
Ooh.
developers are just sort of like plugging in what they think the needs are overall for a lot of different people, where when you work with designers it becomes custom to you, which I think is really exciting, but obviously also comes with privilege because a lot of us don't have the luxury of getting to pick where things go when they move in. It's kind of already existing for you, so yeah.
Right. Well, what maybe you can share with us, maybe it's confidential, but your most amazing space that you designed up until now.
What would be my most amazing space that I've designed up until now? Ooh, I think what I really liked is when wellness became really a part of the home,
Mm,
and like working on like a spa at a house that had a cold plunge and those kinds of really yummy things. Like that to me is where I think that design needs to move. I think since the pandemic, really thinking about the home as both where you live, where you work, where you educate. It could also be a broadcast station. And
Wow.
that to me really gets me excited, is about designing things that have lots of different purpose and can be used in lots of different types of ways. And I think that's really shifted since the pandemic. I really get excited about ADUs. That's really been fun for me. Doing accessory dwelling units seems like an ode to the past. We used to like have land, and every time we outgrew our space, we added another one. We didn't just move. So I love seeing people buy land, have a house, think about their grandmother coming, think about this needing to be a workspace over here, and just sort of growing their plots versus us just always seeing the households and families divided. Like seeing it start to come back together has really been exciting to see. And that's a really big change, I think, that's happening right now, is watching clients no longer want the bells and whistles, but thinking about how their house is an investment and their long-term goals of bringing their families back together is pretty sweet.
I love that so much. When I was a little kid, my dad was an immigrant from Finland, and so he and our family lived in one house. Across the driveway was my aunt and uncle and my cousins. And then at the end, bottom of the driveway, my grandparents lived. And so we were all just kind of shoved onto this half an acre parcel of land in Seattle. And I just thought it was so fun as a little kid to just say, I'm going to my moo house. And then I just like, walked down the driveway and down the stairs, down the sidewalk, and I was at my grandma's house. And I knew she loved me so much. And then she could always just send me home.
Absolutely. I
So
think that's
I'm,
so important. Like, I think
yeah,
that's so important, and I would like to see us getting back to that. Like, I'd love even to see developers take a pass at creating parcels of land that can be set up for future design and future use so that we can like really bring communities back together. We talk about tribe all the time in my community, but we're so far away from each other. And I think the best way to do that is really to start thinking about architecture that could be modular and how it can be placed and clustered together so that you can raise your kids together. If you are, say, a single mom because you have the grandparent or the cousins across the street, or you can have your kids now go to school back in nature because they're learning and they're having their education outside. And we're all just sort of taking turns taking care of each other. Architecture plays a really big role in our environment and our ability to do that. So by the way that I design and by the way that I set up structure and the way that I program it, I can actually create that community structure again, which I think is something that we really, really need as we just grow closer to understanding that that connectivity and that interconnectedness is really for our well-being. And we need it. We need each other for sure.
oh, right on. So do you only design in California? Or I know you go to other states as well. How does that work?
I have designed in California, Chicago, New York, Austin, Texas, and Kenya. How that works is A, you need a partner with people that are local, learn about the local culture, local people, local designers, and collaborate. And B, most things are done on the computer. It's kind of amazing that the time period in which we live in, that if I'm working, I mainly focus right now on renovations, which I call Zen renovations. And the way that that works is I have an as-built team. They go and they take all the existing measurements of the space. And sometimes they do it with like really cool 3D stuff. It creates a 3D drawing immediately. And then we take those drawings and we get straight into schematics. Schematics is that really rough phase of sketching, deciding, oh, how many bathrooms, how many of this, where does the kitchen want to be, where are the views, where do you want your natural sunlight to come in? That's called schematics. And I'm really able to do a lot of that before ever actually having to go on site. But then once you get through schematics and you have a general idea of what the design wants to be and how it takes shape, then obviously, hopefully, how that works is there's budget for me to travel. And that's very exciting to be able to travel for work.
Oh my gosh, cool. So what did you design in Kenya?
I actually just did retaining walls, which is kind of very simple.
Mm.
Uh, I had a dear friend who inherited a bunch of land, and we built some really cool retaining walls. That is basically the first phase of her building a school. And so that was really exciting. So it's nerdy, but working with surveyors and soils reports and learning about her land and sort of marking out like a future plan um, was really what we started with, which is really exciting. And so that will continue to evolve, but I've started to make my way to the continent a little bit.
I love that so much, Lauren, because when someone thinks, I think when the average person thinks about an architect, they think about someone designing a building or remodeling a house or designing something ginormous like an office building or an apartment building or a hotel, right? I don't think about the land, but everything's on land.
Everything is on land, and I have been in my career field for about 15 years. And I've also been at the same time reclaiming my Afro-Indigenous heritage.
Mm.
A lot of architecture is extracting from the land. And so I got to a point in my career where I want to install on land, learn from the land, learn what the needs of these communities are before we start building things so that it's adding to the land's value and not extracting from that land. And so I've been really playing with this idea of stewardship versus ownership, what it means to be connected to land if you're going to build on land. And it's no different if, say, you wanted to pick some sage, that you go to that sage bush and you set some intentions and you're grateful for it and you understand that it's an offering and you even give back to that plant. I now do that with my architecture. I cannot design stuff unless I know who it's for, what the end results are, what the implications are. There's a lot that goes into it for me that's very spiritual. And so that's why, I'm trying to gear towards certain clients that understand that. But the work that I'm doing, it it shifts. It shifts, right? Like you think about how many earthquakes we have in California. Some of that comes from the way that we're extracting and the way that we're building, that
Mm.
seismically we're changing the earth. And so I really like to work with nature in order to create architecture.
That's so beautifully put. It makes me think of big projects that are required by certain governmental groups and systems to have reports about the maybe ancient indigenous sites, maybe the plants and the animals that live on the land. I mean, someone has to go out there and make a report before anyone gets to do any digging or shifting of the land. And you're sort of doing that on a smaller scale.
Yeah, it's like conscious design or designing with intentionality. Um, I just care a lot about everything that I'm doing. And so, of course, if I'm working on a piece of property, I want to know the heritage and the history of it. Of course, that just seems, for me, that seems like a no-brainer. But
Yeah.
it's amazing to see how it's not. And so I think I'll go forth making sure that architectural firms and developers, they have more consciousness as they're creating, so that way we can create a future that really restores our planet. It would be ideal, I think, for all of us since we live here.
Since we do live on the planet.
Yeah.
When you finish a project, do you tend to have a ritual to like hand it over to the owners? Or do you do anything specific around that?
Yeah, so when I worked in high-end design in Southern California for like a who's who of people, it's called turnkey, right? Like it's got to be turnkey. It's like down to the toothbrush. And so we're liable for those projects, and the contractor is liable for 10 years. So before I would turn the houses over, I actually would live in them, test them. Oh my God, the shower is not quite hot. Can we turn up the water heater a little bit more, work on the pressure, swim in the pools, like test out the house like it's going to be their first time being there. Because the last thing you want to do is say it's turnkey and then they move into the house and their first experience is things that are not working well. So I actually did that because I was one of the youngest people on my team. Everyone has families and children and wives and dads and all the people to go home to. And I'm like, oh, I'll volunteer. And so I got to really live in some really exclusive, amazing houses and test out everything. But like, I might have saged the entire house. I might have, made some wheat cookies in the oven. I might have just really had my own ceremonies with these spaces. And it's mainly because when you're working in residential, you don't get to go back to it. So it's like I work on these things and then we have to like break up. And
Oh
so
yeah.
it's sort of like my goodbye to the things that I'm working on that I'm just gonna have. We're gonna have our final date together. And so that was a big part of my 20s is that I would get to live on these exclusive properties and just kind of be the owner for a week and test them out. And I think if you work with your team and you respect your team, that's the best ritual you can have, personally.
Yeah. I love that idea and the idea that you're breaking up.
You're
Uh,
breaking up.
You've done like, especially on a turnkey residential property, you've worked months, maybe years to create this product. And I'm sure it does feel like breaking up.
It's
When you-
wild. Some of the projects were 2 to 4 years long.
Yeah.
Um, I worked with an artist who was my favorite artist, and I was on his project for about 4 years. He was also at the time the only African American person that I'd ever worked with that was also from Chicago. And so there's like a lot of really built in history there. And so I gave that project my all. And then you get to that part where, okay, it's no longer a drawing, it's no longer a job site, it's no longer needs to be installed, it's done. And then you walk away, and it's almost like you have to have a new identity, kind of. You have this whole way that you're relating to this space, and you get so intimate with it. In a lot of ways, before they move in and have their first holidays, I'm more intimate with their space than they are. And then you never go back again. And it's not like a relationship where you like, Mercury retrograde, you keep tabs on each other. Like it's done. Like you literally have to like let it go or let them go off to college or let them find their way.
Mm,
And then you're just on to the next thing. And I've learned a lot about architecture and a lot about relationships and how they correlate. It's kind of something that I kind of see as the same. Um, but yeah, it's been fun. It's better for me that it's been that way than working 30 years and I can predict my day. I love that my career has allowed it to be very unpredictable and there's no ceiling and it's constantly evolving and there's always room for growth. It's a fascinating career path that I would love to see more women and more young people take up space in.
oh yeah, I would love that too. If more women designed more buildings, it would be such a better world. Thinking of dating and this story you just told us about working on a project for years, do you ever get invited back, like to their parties or their events and like, here's my architect, you should meet her.
In the beginning of my career, absolutely not, because I was, not the lead.
Right.
Um, but now I find that everyone I work with, we're lifelong. I think
Hmm.
that similar to like a hairstylist, like I'll do the nursery when the baby comes and the
Oh,
retirement home when we get to retirement.
love it.
It's really kind of amazing that you get to be there for people as they're growing their wealth or their portfolio or their family dynamics, or just their rituals and the way that they want to live is changing. But yeah, I actually hopefully in the future would like to kind of stay more involved in my homes and like not maintaining them, but something of that sort. It's like where we kind of bring the landscapers and the sound engineers and all the different people that it takes to work on estates and kind of create staffing that has a similar energetic vibe as myself, because some of these wealthy houses, like it takes like 10 20 people to work on them every day, and I'd love to create like conscious estate management even. I think
Oh,
that would be
that's
beautiful. Yeah.
that is a great idea. I
Yeah.
love that. And why don't you share with anyone who's listening who doesn't already know your history, how you're not just an architect, you're not just a conscious designer, but you actually worked in the trenches, like walking through the houses and making sure the crews are finishing things. You want to talk a little bit about that part of your past? Because I do believe that when you hire someone in a trade and they're like, oh yeah, I know it from the nitty gritty, they have already so much um, credibility.
Yes, and it gives you confidence too. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of amazing. I backdoored my way in. I mean, I feel like as an African American woman, you kind of have to do that, right? You kind of have to like knock the walls down, like literally demoing. And so I worked in construction. I worked in construction as a teenager with all of my cousins, and it was in Chicago, Illinois, and we were doing demo and installation and roofing and all the things. I was the only girl. And one day, one of the clients was like, "Hey, can you like redesign something?" And I just figured it out. I just figured out how to figure out where the plumbing wanted to be in a drawing and where the electrical wanted to be and just certain things. And because I was working with my own cousins, they weren't really like looking at my drawings like, oh, they suck or whatever. And they were just like, yeah, let's figure out how to do this together. And so I had the electrician show me how to do an RCP, you know, like I had a plumber show me how to do plumbing specifications. I had real tradespeople show me how to do things for a project that, little behold, my client was like, you should go to design school. Have you ever thought about being an architect? And I was just like, wow. And I was exhausted. I was laboring for a living. And I was wondering, like, I'm not a boy. I'm 5'2". I can't pick up the power tools. Like, how am I going to do this long term? And so I started selling construction projects and quickly got myself into design school. And when I got myself in design school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I really wanted to learn construction documents so that I could flip houses and continue to work with my cousins. It wasn't until I was in school that I created my own voice or had my own aesthetic, and things kind of went beyond that. But I started in construction, and then fast forward, I was hired to move to Malibu to work on a house from someone I knew in Chicago, and it was a really large estate. And that was sort of my big break. And on my way here, I applied for architecture school and got in. And so that was kind of my roadmap to getting into it. But it also is what sets me apart. Being able to know how things are built and how materials come together, and being able to interface with trades, and also like respecting these trades and scheduling it properly. It allows for them to be able to take ownership of what they're doing and do a really good job. But it also allows me to beat my competitors because I'm able to build faster as a result of it. And so I just do design and build as kind of one thing. And no one knows now, like when I go through job sites wearing my cute outfits, that I was a laborer. They would never know that I started off, taking loads of shit to dumpsters. They would never know that. But I love that as my background story, because I feel like even to do well in architecture, you do have to work hard, even though it is something that is considered like scholarly or professional. We are professionals that work extremely hard. So all of that really prepared me for going further into architecture. But I still am like more on the project management side. I really want to get onto the job sites and do design in real time, in real life, and really work that way versus just getting locked behind the computer.
I love that so much because I'm 100% certain that there are some designers and architects who have no idea how the plumbing actually gets into the walls or how the electricity has to go through the beams and the studs. And they're designing things that might not even be easy to build.
Yeah, and expensive.
Yeah.
I talk about economy of design. I can do the most amazing everything you want and still have it have economy of design because yes, we're thinking about how this stuff is happening at the beginning of a project. What
Yeah.
makes me uniquely different is that I tend to roll with a structural engineer so they can tell me what I can and cannot do from the jump. That way I don't fall in love with designs that are not possible or sell ideas that are not realistic, or just blow my budgets through the water for no good reason whatsoever. So it definitely is very, very helpful to have that sort of approach to design. I think too, there's a lot of degrees of talent in architecture, from the decorator to the interior designer to an interior architect to an architect, and being able to differentiate what those things are and how much information one person knows is something that can be a bit challenging because architecture can also be considered affluent, and so you can have a lead on a project because it's from their community of affluency, yet they don't know how anything is really working and how it's happening or how these things work. And so I tend to then teach them the process as opposed to being upset about it. Like, okay. And we'll lean on them for their aesthetic or lean on them for, what they know about different designers and what's trending and all those kinds of things. There's power in it. And there's also power in someone that can bring in a big project. So I just respect people from wherever they come. But typically I'm hired because I'm the person who's going to really get the shit done.
I love it. That's kind of like a drop moment. But let me ask you one big question before we quit this conversation. And we have to have like 1,000 more. This is so much fun. If you did, if someone gave you your perfect job right now, today, what would it be?
Oh my God. I would want to design hotels and nail it, do a good job, and continue to scale it. I want to do boutique hospitality
Okay.
where there's residential within it, studios, like music studios within it, really great wellness and spa programs, blending nature into it, obviously, and just commercial hospitality. I think can go anywhere in the world. So it's like you can design one and then you can see it exist. But I feel I could have a different take on hospitality than already exists. And because I care about the way people work and the way that they live and all these kinds of things, like I would want to create a hospitality project that's nice to the staff. You know what I mean? That's like regenerative for everyone that's involved. And so I'm really interested in creating architecture that is regenerative and also allows for everyone to have shared equity in the things that I'm doing.
Wait, even the people who work there?
Yes,
Yes. I love
it's
you for that.
totally possible. And I
Yes.
feel like those types of models of thinking to the person who's experienced everything, they will buy into it too. They just don't see it being done. They don't have any reference points. Well, regenerative architecture that creates equity for everyone involved would be amazing. Think about who would show up to work and the type of pride you would get and how you can duplicate that.
Who wouldn't want to go to a spa where you can do all the things and everyone who works there is super happy and is making a living wage?
I'm saying that obviously comes from my African American background, though. There are moments when I'm in architecture where I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, where I don't want to feel like a house slave. I want to create architecture that I don't have to be in service anymore. You know what I mean? I want to be in service of prayer and chanting and other things. But I can think about me in the beginnings of my career having burnout and not having equity in the things that I'm designing and building wealth for other people and thinking that there's maybe something wrong with this. And so as I continue to dream, I would like there to be some sort of a system where we all benefit from the things that we create. And I think that so many different people across all different disciplines would totally understand that.
Absolutely. Thank you for this conversation today. I really, really loved it.
Thank you. You're amazing.